Hi, I'm Scott Feinberg from The Hollywood Reporter, and it's great to be here today with Lady Gaga. Congratulations on a great performance, the New York Film Critics Circle Best Actress Award, and a lot of good stuff going on for you at the moment, right?
Thank you so much, Scott. Yeah, it's been really wonderful. I appreciate all the awards and the nominations. It's been incredible to watch, and I just love being a part of this project. My entire cast, and Ridley Scott, my director, Giannina Scott. It's this has been a really wonderful journey.
Well, I wonder if you can take us back before it a little bit first, just to note. I mean, obviously, most people first discovered you through music, and then in the last few years, we've been seeing more and more of you acting. But can you just tell us a little bit about how early on acting was actually an interest of yours?
That's a very good question. So I actually was very interested in being an actor long before I ever wanted to be a singer, and this all started when I was really very little. I loved singing, dancing, and performing as an actress when I was really, really little. And I began to take acting classes at a place called the Monica May Academy of Acting when I was 9 years old. And then I started to actually go to the Lee Strasberg Institute around 11. And that's an institute in New York, right by Union Square. And it's based off of Stanislavski method. I did a lot of sense memory work, and I studied there through the end of high school. I also went to Circle in the Square Conservatory during the summer, and I spent 2 semesters at Tisch for musical theater, and before I dropped out to pursue my dreams. So I've been studying acting for a long time, and that also includes literature and philosophy about art. Um, I also took art history classes. I've always been a real Renaissance woman, and it was part of the texture of me as a child to follow artistry. So I love acting. I loved films, and Judy Garland was my hero. It still is. Uh, and here we are now, all these years later. I
Yeah.
think I put a lot of acting into my music in a way, and then after some cameos in Robert Rodriguez films, and then a leading role in Ryan Murphy's American Horror Story, and then A Star Is Born, of course, with the amazing Bradley Cooper, and now Ridley Scott's House of Gucci. This has now been more of a genuine trajectory for me that I can really sink my teeth into as a woman who loves the scholarly aspect of acting.
And let's not forget a little Sopranos appearance as well. I think
That's
before
right.
anything, right?
You got me there, Scott. That's true. I
Yeah.
was an extra on The Sopranos. I also was an extra in an AC/DC music video when I was way too young to be
Really?
there. Yes, I was. I knew
So,
how to headbang.
so let's talk about your first major role in a movie was A Star Is Born. You mentioned Bradley, and I'm sure there were a lot of things that you took away from that experience. But I guess going from that to working with Ridley Scott, who's been doing this for decades and decades. I guess let's just talk about how this came about. How soon after Star is Born did you find out that there even was going to be such a project as House of Gucci?
It wasn't for quite some time. I would say it was at least a year. And this project was floating around, and then I was flirting with the script, and I had this very interesting relationship with the script. I was completely enamored that Ridley Scott was attached to it. But I had heard that it was about a woman who was a murderer, and I played the Countess on American Horror Story, who was also notoriously a murderer, uh, by way of her needing to eat. She fed off the blood of all sorts of people, including children. So
Understandable.
understand as one does. At first I thought, is this a thing? Do people want me to play a murderer again? And because I have some type of evil quality that I'm not aware of. But then I really got to know the script and got to know Ridley on a deeper level. And I realized that this story was about a woman that was really in love. And she actually did not marry him for his money. He didn't have money when they got married. And she didn't kill him for his money because they were divorced when he was murdered. So there is this sort of nuance to the character that I found interesting. And I discovered that this was a woman that she lived her life in a mode of survival. So this murder that took place was essentially something that came out of a need to survive. And in that way, this script that came from something that was sort of floating around me and orbiting me as I tried to figure out what it all meant, became something really, truly, tangibly interesting and challenging, and something I wanted to take on. How could I tell a story about a real woman who was not born a murderer? The Countess was born a murderer. She was born a vampire. Patrizia Reggiani was born a child, and she became a murderer.
Now, this was, I believe, your first time playing somebody who had actually lived and is living. And, on, I guess people talk about there being a sort of sense of responsibility, an added sense of responsibility when that's the case. In this case, it's extra complicated because I guess, she's, because of all that history that you recounted, I don't know how interested she was in being consulted. I don't know how interested you were in consulting her, but does it add a little bit of extra burden for the actor when you're playing somebody who actually roamed the earth?
I think that it's sort of a double-edged sword. It's like on the one hand, there's a real gift that you're being given because they were a real person. So there's, especially someone that was famous, there's lots of information you can find out about them, very specific details. I mean, I found video footage. I was so excited when I found video footage of her signing things. Because she worked for her father in accounting, and she was constantly signing checks and forging signatures. So watching the way she did it in real life, I could figure out how to put her body into my body and the physicality of her, the things that she went through, the data points, the biography, the backstory of Patrizia Reggiani was right there. So in that way, on one side of the sword, it's a gift. On the other side, I think you can veer off into the territory of mimicking or imitating somebody, which I think is not necessarily a mistake. I think that everybody can approach doing a film about a real person in a different way. But for me, even if I became very like her and similar to her, even if I seemed to be mimicking her in some way, I wanted that not to be driven by me copying her in some type of way, or actually mimicking her in some type of way, but rather that I would study her and study why she became the way she was, study her dialect, the particular type of Italian accent that she had, even when she spoke in Italian, the way that she spoke, the timbre of her voice, even the way it changed from being higher when she was younger to being lower when she was older because she started incessantly smoking. These are all the sorts of things that I would say are at play when playing a real person. Is you get the effect of the gratitude of all the information, and then after having all that information, you have to be careful, I think, not to make too much of a characterization or a caricature, I should say, of the person, but rather to find the humanity. And I really wanted to find the humanity in her. And the biggest responsibility I felt was to her daughters. And I thought that it was important that I tell a story about a woman and a story about women in general, not generalized. I like to be specific in my acting, but a woman who holds the stories of many women, women all over the world who lose their looks, who lose the love of their life, women who think they're important in an intellectual space, in a business space, and who are disposed of, and what type of trauma and abuse does that induce, and how could I find her strength? The thing I found out Maurizio loved about her the most was how strong she was. How could I portray their mother in a way where she was real, even if she was wrong or if she was deeply flawed?
Now, people are always, non actors are always curious about what you brought up earlier, Stanislavski method, these kind of mysterious things and how they're applied. And there's obviously been a lot of interest in the little bits and pieces that people have heard about how you applied those to preparing for this. But I want to leave it up to you to share as much as you'd like about just, it is or in your case, it was a months long process of focusing on certain things. I know you said it's not mimicking or imitating exactly, but there were certain things that you focused on. And I wonder what those were.
Gosh, I focused in. I focused in pretty precisely on a lot of different things. Like I said, the way she spoke, the way that she moved her body, particularly her neck and her shoulders were like had a very specific quality, especially when she was lying. But that was later in her life, so I kind of had to figure out at what point in the script certain things that I discovered were usable, and then at what point earlier in her life would those things have to go away because she would not have yet experienced the trauma to kind of put her neck in that place. So I studied her mannerisms. I studied the way that she did and did not have eye contact with people at various different times. I studied very intently her gaze. She had a very intense gaze, and she has a very intense presence. I studied her childhood. What I would say is before we get to the sense memory, there's an intense narrative that's built around the human being, and it's all written down, and I read it over and over again. And that is done in conjunction with a breakdown of the script with my wonderful acting teacher, Susan Batson, who's absolutely brilliant. Her work with the script is it's absolutely mind-blowing and intricate. And then the sense memory work, this work that I do is, from a young age, I learned to use, sound, taste, smell, and the ability to have the mind evoke touch and feeling to be generative of circumstance. For me, there was various songs or textures or smells or even just closing my eyes and seeing an image of someone could help me to map my own body and my own nervous system to Patrizia Reggiani's nervous system. And I know that might sound curious, but from like a scientific and biological perspective, I think one of the ways that I think that like method acting seems to be mysterious is people are sort of saying, well, what is it that you're doing? Do you just think that you're that person? Do you forget who you are? When really for me, it's about not forgetting who I am. It's about calibrating my nervous system to what I believe to be the nervous system of the character. And once I calibrate that and I interpret my own trauma from my life into the trauma of this woman, then we have like the train that's going to run on the tracks of Ridley Scott's film. And the steam that pumps into me is just this sort of endless onslaught of evocative sense. And it allows me to be free in the space and to feel and touch and see and experience in a present way, while also being centered in a new gravity. Meaning, I believe while I'm working, the center of gravity from scene to scene has got to change, because what's happening in the story is changing, and this is how I feel that I'm able to be real in a scene while also being consistent while we shoot out of order, so that the performance tracks, so that I understand where her heart is and where her bottom is. One of my favorite things to do before starting any scene, especially if I have one more. You know, if Ridley would do 3 takes and he'd go, "I've got it," and then he'd say, "Do you want one more?" And I'd say, "Yes, I would love. I'm totally ready. I would like one more." And I would do another one, and I would say to myself, "Protect your little girl," because she was protecting herself. And so I used to think of me when I was young, and then allow myself as Patrizia to protect the young me in moments where I was being threatened. And I find that women, we are ferocious when we are protecting the little us that's inside.
Well, and is this maybe connected to something else you've talked about that I think you visualize or draw upon certain animals?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I draw on animals. For this performance, when she was young, she was a house cat. For its sort of elusive character, and aloof but charming, seductive but sweet and elegant. Then she became a fox once Rodolfo passes away, because now the will is in Maurizio's hands and the hunt begins. But again, this is a hunt for survival. So using an animal that hunts to eat other animals was more appropriate than, for example, an animal that doesn't eat other animals.
Right,
The fox worked well, and the fox was quite playful. So this allowed for her relationship with Maurizio and Aldo to be more playful while she was hunting, because she's part of the family and she wants to keep the family close. And again, this is all mode of survival for an Italian woman, is let's keep the family close together. I'm going to inspire my husband to take helm of this good fortune, and to really excel in the world in a way that I never could have excelled, because I wasn't grown. I didn't grow up with the same wealth and privilege that my husband did. So it's this like and then this playful hunt, like the fox burrowing through the snow, changes when the divorce happens. When she's served with divorce papers by Domenico Darsole at the school, it's at this point that she goes from being a fox and playing around to becoming a panther, and the hunt becomes serious. And I chose the panther because it cries after it kills its prey. And I believed that Patrizia did do something that was essentially the biggest mistake of her life. It was done in a fit of rage and trauma, and it was also done for survival. And I believe that she experienced deep regret and pain afterwards. And I remember reading that when the police came to get her, they said, "We're here to arrest you for the murder of your husband." And she goes, "Good." So
wow.
I knew that she knew what she did was wrong. And I really believe she lived with deep, deep regret. And I think she still does. So yes, animals. There you go. There's my long
Yes.
answer. I give lots of
No,
long answers. I'm sorry.
it's all good. It's very, very good. And I have spoken with a few of your co-stars over last few months, and one of the things they each remarked about was that the way Ridley shoots is not something they've necessarily encountered before. I guess he has a lot of different cameras going at once, so that maybe that results in fewer takes than there otherwise would normally be. Can you talk about his setup and how you like working that way?
I really love Ridley's setup. It is very different from any way that I've worked before. There's a real geometry to the way that he shoots. He's an architect, And I think, he sees scenes in shapes, not just in the circumstances of the story and where we are, but it's got a whole graphic nature. So what I would say is, having worked in other scenarios, you can sometimes, depending on your coverage, there's like a rehearsal or a warm-up period, and sometimes we would rehearse, and we would block, and we would take some time on things. We would also go over the script, maybe change some things like us. He was very collaborative with the actors all the time. For example, if there was something for me that didn't make like sense as an Italian woman, I could say it, and I was well received. I mean, everything was very collaborative and celebratory. He was very empowering. But what I would also say is that you don't get that time, which I think is good. You don't get that time to warm up. So you have to be ready, which made the being in character all the time essential for me, because if I was just with her constantly, whether he yelled action or not, it didn't matter. I was right there and ready, because I don't bring with me in the scene. Once they yell action, I throw all the work out the window. I mean, it's just, it's in another galaxy now. It's nowhere near me, because if I'm not present and talking to the actor, I really believe that it destroys the reality of the performance. So what I would say is, it's a real gift to us, because essentially Ridley's saying, you have to be ready. You have to be ready, because I'm going to shoot you all at the same time. I'm not going to shoot coverage, and I'm going to edit. He's going to edit it. It's going to be edited in this way where whatever happened as it happened is going to be what's used. So it allows for true alchemy. It's not just the magic of filmmaking. It's filmmaking being made by a magician who really appreciates the nature of the work as it occurs on set. And I think that's very special. I think that some people might view this as parameters and view this as like rigid and difficult to operate within. But I am a jazz singer, and you have to learn the ink that's on the page before you can improvise. You have to know your stuff before you can make it your own. So Ridley just demands that you know your stuff, and I think that sets a very high bar. And I don't think a single cast member of mine likes walking over low bars. So there were lots of high bars that we were all ready to jump over for Ridley.
Right.
He's wonderful.
Well, and you know what? You transitioned perfectly to the last question I want to ask you, which is that, for even Meryl Streep, who's been doing this, acting, let's say, for 50 years, I imagine it might be intimidating to share the screen with, this is like probably somewhere between 5 and 10 fellow Oscar winners who are unbelievable, whether it's Al Pacino and Jeremy Irons and Jared Leto, and just it's an amazing group. And I wonder for you, it's easy to forget, because I think you're so good in this, that again, you've only been the star of one other movie prior to this. Was that intimidating to have to hold your own against these guys, or do you kind of get a kick, or maybe kicks you up into high gear to know that you're doing it with people who are at the top of their game as well?
I think it initially gave me this tremendous sense of gratitude for the faith that all these actors had in working with me as a leading actress in the film. I could not believe the cast that was created. It was just, it was one of the most humbling experiences of my career. What I will say is that when you will be working with people that are artists of this caliber, I think the most sensible thing to do would be to honor that there are people all over the world that are willing to do anything to be an actor and to be working in the film industry. And you better work your butt off and do a good job. And you better study, you better be ready, and also most importantly, be willing and open to learn. There was so much for me to learn on that set. Every time Al was rehearsing, every time Jeremy was rehearsing, Adam, anytime I saw anything happening on set, I was attuned and watching, or I was doing my own work. But I wasn't living in my head. You know, when you allow yourself to feel the soulful, like the ethos of the people around you, you can learn so much. So for me, it was in learning from them that I saw an opportunity to grow. And also, the thing I had to be ready for the most was to truly live as her, so that I could just purely listen and be in these scenes and react and respond in a natural way. I think if I had been too intimidated all the time, it would have been impossible for me to do scenes with Al.
Right.
But when I grounded in Patrizia and we were hanging out at his birthday party in Tuscany, I was just able to sit there. I remember sitting there, and Federico, who did props, he brought over a bowl of nuts. And my grandfather, he always, as a child, my grandmother always brought a bowl of nuts to the table after dinner, and we would all crack nuts at the table. And I remember sitting there going, okay, I'm going to shoot this scene with Al Pacino, and I'm in character, and Adam's there and Al's there, so I'm with Maurizio and Aldo, and I see the nuts, and I see this walnut, and I remember my grandfather cracking the hell out of walnuts, and I go, Federico, per piacere, una, and he was like, okay, and he brings over some nutcrackers, and I just started cracking those nuts during that whole scene, just trying to stay awake while Aldo kept talking, and because in that scene she's kind of over it, you know, she's been there all day and with these smelly cows, and she wants Maurizio to work for the family, but Aldo's now had 2 birthday parties because he loves himself so much, and she's just eating those nuts. But that came from that place of my ancestors and my grandfather, and also in my ability to try to put myself firmly into the ground on equal footing with both people in the room, so that I didn't shrink with intimidation. But I will say that when I first met Al in person when we were in Rome, that was really a special moment, and I had a long chat with myself that feeling had to go away so that I could do
Right.
my job on set. He's an immaculate human being, and the getting to know him has been wonderful.
Well, and I know as impressed as you are with them, having spoken with Al and Jared recently, it was very clear that it was very mutual. So I think you very much impressed them and a lot of other people. So thanks for doing this, and
Thank you.
enjoy the rest of the season. Yeah, thanks
Thank
a
you
lot.
so much. Thank you. Thanks, Scott.